I've built my career on a simple truth. Everyone lies. As a couples therapist, I'm a human lie detector. I can spot the subtle shift, the averted gaze, the hand that trembles over a forgotten credit card bill. I know the architecture of deceit. My only mistake was believing the one man who claimed to be radically honest. That was a new kind of lie. And I, with all my training, was the perfect, lonely fool to fall for it. My office was a carefully curated space of soft grays, brushed steel, and sound-absorbing panels. It was a room designed for revelations. From my Eames chair, I watched Ben and Sarah, 10 years my junior and already drowning. "When you say she panics," I said, my voice as calm as the Zen garden on my desk. "What does that look like?" Ben's thumb rubbed a white circle on the back of Sarah's hand. "She just shuts down. It's like talking to a wall." "And Sarah," I turned to her, "when he says you're a wall, what are you feeling on the other side of it?" Her eyes welled up. "That I'm failing." I nodded, giving her the space to let the words land. "This is the work then. Ben, your work is to stop diagnosing her panic and start asking what she's feeling. Sarah, your work is to trust him with the answer." They nodded, a fragile truce settling between them. They were going to make it. I was good at this. I could see the hidden architectures of relationships, the load-bearing walls of trust, and the hairline fractures of resentment. I could fix just about anyone, except, it seemed, myself. That night, the silence of my condo was louder than Ben and Sarah's argument. I had built a fortress of success, a career that commanded respect, an apartment with a view that spanned the city. From the inside, it felt exactly like a cage. I poured a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, the condensation cold against my fingers, and sat on my perfect gray sofa. I was 48. I ate kale salads and ran 5 miles every other day. I was solvent, stable, and profoundly, terribly lonely. My phone was a block of glass and light. I opened the app, not one of the disposable frantic apps, but the League. The one for professionals, the one that vetted its members, that promised to weed out the frauds and the time wasters. I'd had my share of those. The 50-year-old who, in person, was 60 and smelled of stale cigars. The finance bro who, upon learning I was a therapist, asked me to analyze his portfolio. I swiped. No, no. A man in a salmon-colored blazer holding a large fish. Absolutely not. And then Marcus. His profile was different. His photos were candid, not staged. Laughing at a dinner table, reading a book in a sun-drenched park. He was handsome, maybe 50, with salt and pepper hair and deep-set eyes that looked like they were listening. His bio was simple: wealth manager, believer in radical honesty. Let's talk about something real. I pressed the heart. He messaged me within an hour. Our first date was at a quiet wine bar with exposed brick walls. The air smelled of Pinot Noir and old wood. He didn't just ask me what I did. He asked me why. "You must see the absolute worst of people," he said, leaning in. He wasn't pulling away like most men did. He was engaging. "I see the most human parts," I corrected gently. "The parts everyone tries to hide. The shadow self," he mused, swirling his drink. "Do you find that, in most relationships, the real breakdown is just a failure of language?" A failure to be honest? I was stunned. It was the electric and intellectual connection the plan had promised. "It's almost always a failure of honesty," I agreed. "Or a fear of what that honesty will cost." We talked for 3 hours. He quoted Rilke. He'd read Esther Perel. He understood the nuances of my work without my having to dilute them. He was, I thought, a man who had done his own work. The several weeks from the plan melted away. They were a blur of art exhibits, late-night diners, and long, meandering conversations in my condo. He was the first man I'd brought back here in, I couldn't remember how long. One evening, we were on my balcony, the city lights glittering below like a spilled box of jewels. The air was cool, and he had draped his jacket over my shoulders. The scent of sandalwood and wool filled my senses. He took my hand. His was warm, dry, and steady. "Ilara, he started, his voice serious. "I have to be completely, radically honest with you. It's the only way I know how to be." I felt a familiar cold prickle of dread. Here it came. The ex-wife who wasn't really an ex. The complicated situation. "I am ethically non-monogamous," he said, his eyes fixed on mine, unwavering. "I have a primary partner. She and I have been together for a long time. Our agreement is built on total transparency, with her and with anyone else I see." I pulled my hand away, the cold air hitting my skin. "A primary partner. Yes, this isn't a secret. It's my philosophy. I don't believe in owning people. I don't believe in the architecture of traditional toxic monogamy. I don't want to lie to you, Alara, ever. My mind, the therapist's mind, was racing. I saw the pitfalls, the potential for jealousy, the complex negotiations. My entire career was built on repairing the damage from relationships far simpler than this. But my heart, the lonely 48-year-old heart, heard something else. He didn't lie. He was offering me connection. Intelligence and warmth, all wrapped in the one thing I valued most: honesty. He wasn't a game player. He was laying all his cards on the table. He watched me, giving me the space to process. He didn't push. "I'm surprised," I said. "It's a lot to take in," he acknowledged, his voice soft. "But I care about you. And the worst thing I could do is start what we have with a deception." I looked at him, this charismatic, articulate, honest man. And then I looked back at the empty, silent condo behind me. I thought of the lonely dinners, the endless, sterile evenings. This, I reasoned, was different. It was modern. It was progressive. It was honest. This was a mature way to love, free from the games I so despised. I put my hand back in his. "Thank you for telling me." He smiled, a slow, deep smile that reached his eyes. "So, you're not running for the door?" I took a slow breath, the scent of sandalwood filling me again, this time a comfort. "I'm not running," he kissed me. It wasn't a kiss of frantic passion. It was a kiss that felt like a seal, a contract. For the first time in a decade, I felt something other than lonely. I felt a profound, vibrating relief. I felt absurdly safe. The next 2 months were a study in modern intimacy. Marcus integrated into my life, or rather, we integrated into the spaces he'd allocated. His honesty was, at first, bracing. "Good morning," his texts would read. "Just finished a run. I'm with my primary tonight, but I've booked us a table at Alinea for Friday. Can you get away by 7? It was all so adult. There was no guesswork, no pining, no wondering where I stood. I was his secondary partner. I knew my place, and I felt respected within it. We'd have dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and often a long, lingering Saturday afternoon that bled into evening. Before he'd politely kiss my forehead and say, I should get home, to his primary. I never asked her name. He never let me. It felt like a boundary I shouldn't cross, a professional courtesy. My therapist brain respected his compartmentalization. My lonely heart was just grateful for the compartments I was allowed into. We went to the symphony. He held my hand in the dark, his thumb tracing circles on my palm while the cellos vibrated through the floor. The scent of his sandalwood cologne was a constant, warm presence. He remembered I disliked cilantro and that I preferred Sancerre to Sauvignon Blanc. He was attentive. He was present. I was, for the first time in memory, blissfully happy. The loneliness that had lived in my bones for a decade had receded, leaving behind a warm, pliable sense of hope. Then came the text. I was at my office, just finishing notes on a client, a man struggling to tell his husband he no longer wanted children. My phone chimed, Marcus. Ilara, my head is splitting. Going to have to cancel tonight. Feel terrible about it. Rain check for tomorrow? A prickle of disappointment, but nothing more. It was normal. Me, of course. Feel better. Want me to drop anything off? Marcus, no. I'll just sleep it off. Talk tomorrow. I shut my laptop and packed my briefcase. It was a cold, damp evening, and the city streets were slick with a fine mist. I thought of him in his apartment, alone with a migraine. The primary was, I assumed, occupied. A sudden, warm impulse struck me. It was the kind of gesture I'd walled off for years. I stopped at my favorite Thai place, the one where the air is thick with lemongrass and chili. I ordered a large tom kha, the coconut ginger broth a cure for almost anything. The smell filled my collar, rich and comforting. I hadn't been to his apartment building, not really. Our evenings were either out or at my condo. He'd said his place was shared space, and he wanted our space to be just ours. I respected that, but this was just a drop-off, a 5-minute act of care. I pulled up to the address he'd used for ride shares. It was a sleek, impersonal glass tower in a wealthy neighborhood. The kind of place with a doorman and a lobby that smelled like expensive, generic floral arrangements. I balanced the hot paper bag, the steam warming my hands, and buzzed the directory. Marcus, I murmured, scanning the list. Monsieur Reynolds. M. Shaw. M. Vance. No, I must have the wrong... Wait, his last name. He'd never actually told me. I'd never asked. We were Alara and Marcus. My therapist brain clicked on, analyzing the omission. My gut just felt a cold drop. A woman in a stylish raincoat, walking a small, shivering greyhound, was exiting the building. She held the heavy glass door open for me. Thanks, I said, slipping inside. I'm looking for Marcus on the directory, but I'm blanking on his last name. I laughed. A light, airy sound I didn't recognize. How embarrassing. The woman smiled kindly. She looked to be about my age, her face open and tired. Oh, which one? There's Marcus in 12C, but he's about 70. No, he's about 50. Salt and pepper hair. Works in finance. Her face lit with recognition. Oh, you mean Marcus Vance, in 4B, but I just saw them come in, the whole family. She nodded toward the elevator bank. They're just back from their son's college orientation. Looked wiped out. The hot bag of soup suddenly felt impossibly heavy. The aroma of lemongrass turned sour in my throat. Vance. Marcus Vance. Son. Family. Them. I managed, my voice sounding thin. Him and Chloe. His wife. The woman said it so casually, like she was pointing out the weather. She gave me one last polite smile and pulled her dog out into the mist. I stood frozen in the lobby. The floral scent was suffocating. Chloe, his wife. Not primary partner. Wife. I turned and walked back out into the cold. I got into my car and set the soup on the passenger seat where it steamed up the window. My hands were shaking. This is a misunderstanding. It has to be. Wife is just a word. Maybe they have a different arrangement. Maybe primary partner is just his progressive term for wife in an open marriage. But the radical honesty was ringing false in my ears. The word family. His son's college orientation. I pulled out my phone, the screen's white light blinding. I opened a private browser. I typed Marcus Vance, Chloe Vance, finance, nothing. I tried social media. I typed Chloe Vance into the search bar. A profile appeared, locked, private, but the profile picture was visible. It was small, a tiny circle of digital life. But I could zoom in. It was him, Marcus. He was smiling. His arm slung around the shoulder of the woman I'd seen in the neighbor's mental snapshot. An attractive, tired-looking blonde. Beside them stood two teenagers, a boy and a girl, all of them beaming on what looked like a boat. My thumb moved, trembling, to the caption just visible under her name. A caption, visible to all. Chloe Vance. Artist, mother, lucky wife. 22 years with my one and only. I dropped the phone onto the dash. The screen stayed lit, illuminating the tiny, happy family. Illuminating the lie. 22 years. My one and only. The blood drained from my face, and a cold, bitter fluid rushed in to replace it. It wasn't ethical. It wasn't progressive. It wasn't modern. It was the oldest, most pathetic, most degrading cliché in the book. He hadn't chosen me as a mature partner in an open arrangement. He had picked me to be his mistress, the other woman, the fool who, with all her training and all her insight, had been the easiest one to deceive. The soup in the passenger seat was getting cold. I put the car in drive, my movements stiff and automatic. The bitterness in my throat tasted like acid. I didn't cry. I just drove, and I started to think. I walked into my condo and set my keys in the glass bowl by the door. The sound was sharp, a single, brittle clap. The bag of Tom Kha soup was still on my passenger seat, a congealing monument to my own stupidity. I'd driven around for an hour, the profile picture of Marcus and his one and only burned onto my retinas. I went back down, retrieved the bag, and carried it to my kitchen. The aroma of lemongrass and coconut now made my stomach clench. I didn't throw it. I didn't rage. I walked to the sink, tore the paper bag, and poured the lukewarm, greasy broth directly into the garbage disposal. I flipped the switch. The mechanical growl was deafening in the silence. It was a vicious, grinding sound, churning the evidence of my hope into septic waste. When it was done, I ran the hot water for a full minute, washing the scent away. My grief wasn't loud. It was a cold, heavy stone in my head. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was humiliated. He hadn't just lied to a woman. He had professionally conned a therapist. He had listened to me talk about my work, about trust, about the architecture of relationships. He had identified my loneliness, my fatigue with games, and my deep-seated belief in the power of truth. Then, he had built a lie perfectly tailored to bypass all my defenses. He had used the language of emotional intelligence as a weapon. The radical honesty wasn't a philosophy. It was a strategy. My phone chimed on the granite countertop. Marcus, feeling a bit better. Thinking of you. Tomorrow still good? My fingers were numb. I stared at the text. The old Alara, the one from 3 hours ago, would have sent a warm, empathetic reply. The grieving Alara wanted to smash the phone against the wall. The new Alara, the one standing in the dark, her hands smelling of dish soap and discarded soup, saw an opportunity. Me. Glad you're feeling better. Tomorrow is perfect. Your pick. I didn't sleep. I sat on my gray sofa, the one he'd sat on, and I made a different kind of plan. He thought I was the other woman. He thought I was the escape. He had no idea I was a diagnostician. You can't dismantle a structure until you've studied the blueprints. The next night, he chose a new place. A dimly lit bistro that smelled of garlic, wine, and roasted meat. The hum of conversation was a perfect cover. He stood when I arrived, smiling that slow, warm smile. He was wearing the dark blue cashmere sweater I'd said I liked. He leaned in to kiss me, and I had to fight every instinct to recoil. I let his lips brush my cheek. The scent of sandalwood and wool flooded my senses. No longer a comfort, but a contaminant. You look beautiful, he murmured, his hand on the small of my back. His touch was a current of ice. You look like your headache's gone, I said, sliding into the booth. A full recovery. He settled opposite me. I'm so sorry about last night. I was a mess. We're all allowed to be a mess, Marcus. I smiled. It was my office smile, calm, empathetic, and utterly false. I watched him as he flagged down the waiter. His posture was open. He mirrored my movements, leaning in when I leaned in. A classic, almost lazy rapport-building technique. He was good, but he was also arrogant. He believed his own performance. So, I said, after we'd ordered wine, you mentioned your son. The college orientation. That's a huge milestone. He didn't flinch. It was a lot, he sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. God, Alara, you're the only person I can say this to. It's not the milestone. It's the dynamic, the family stuff. Your primary partner, I said, testing the phrase. Chloe, yes. He said her name with a practiced exhaustion. She's not on my wavelength. She's trapped in this 1950s idea of what a family should be. Everything is about appearances. The trip was stifling. He reached across the table, his fingers grazing my knuckles. Being with you is like coming up for air. I held his gaze. I cataloged the micro-expressions, the slight pinch at the corner of his eyes to convey sincerity, the controlled exhale that signaled vulnerability. It was a masterful performance. I realized with a cold clarity, watching a textbook narcissist in his native habitat. "I'm glad I can be that for you," I said, my voice soft. He smiled, believing it. He was so busy performing that he never thought to wonder if I was too. "You know," he said, pulling out his phone. "I was on the phone with my firm all morning, trying to put out fires from that trip." "The big deal I told you about? The $50 million one?" My pulse quickened. "Is it in trouble?" "It's just complicated." He bragged for 10 minutes. He talked about due diligence and leveraging assets. He was careless, high on his own charm and my understanding nature. "Hadrian Wealth," he said, "doesn't tolerate mistakes. But I'm the best they've got. I'm their rainmaker, Hadrian Wealth." I filed the name away. He was scrolling through his phone now, looking for an email to show me some proof of his importance. An alert flashed at the top of his screen. A text. I only caught the name. Chloe. He sighed, a put-upon theatrical sound, and angled the screen away. "Sorry," he said. "More drama." "It's okay," I said, sipping my wine. "We're radically honest, remember? You don't have to hide things." He looked at me, his eyes gleaming in the candlelight. He thought I was giving him permission. He thought I was the perfect, understanding, cool girl mistress. "You're incredible, you know that?" He turned the phone back and opened the text. "She's asking about a transfer for the tuition. She has no concept of money," he was showing me. He was showing me his texts with his wife. I felt a surge of nausea, hot and bitter. I swallowed it. "I have to text her back," he said, "or she'll call." He began typing. "It's complicated," I offered, "juggling all of this. You have no idea." He shook his head. "Sometimes I wish you could just handle her for me." He laughed, but he wasn't entirely joking. He finished his text and put the phone down, but it had locked. He picked it back up to show me the restaurant reservation for Friday, the one from Alinea. He tapped in the passcode. 4 digits. I watched his thumb. 1024. "What's that code?" I asked lightly, a playful curiosity. "Your birthday?" He smiled, a private, intimate smile. "My son's birthday, October 24th. He was sharing a secret, another piece of manufactured intimacy. He was binding me to him with the details of the very family he was betraying. It's the same for my laptop, my office portal, everything. I'm a creature of habit. 24. I filed it away, right next to Hadrian Wealth and the sick, cold feeling in my stomach. When I got home, I stripped off my clothes and threw them in the hamper. I stood under the hottest water my shower could produce, scrubbing my skin until it was red, trying to wash the scent of sandalwood and the phantom touch of his hand from my body. I put on a robe, poured a glass of water, no more wine, and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop. The investigation began. I typed in Hadrian Wealth. The website was corporate, sleek, and arrogant. I clicked on Our Team, and there he was, Marcus Vance, Senior Vice President. The photo was professional, sterile. He looked powerful. I scrolled through the other partners. I read the company's bloated mission statement. I found their news section. It was full of press releases about mergers and acquisitions. And then I saw a link. Hadrian Wealth sponsors annual City Arts Gala. I clicked it. A new page opened. A photo gallery. Men in tuxedos, women in gowns, and in the center of the third photo, raising a glass of champagne, was Marcus. His arm was wrapped tight around a smiling, elegant blonde woman in an emerald green dress. Her head was tilted toward his, a look of simple, uncomplicated adoration on her face. The caption underneath read, SVP Marcus Vance and his wife, artist Chloe Vance. I stared at the photo. The bitterness I'd felt before was nothing to this. This was a cold, sharp, surgical rage. His lie wasn't just a compartmentalized affair. It was a comprehensive public deception. He wasn't just hiding me from her. He was hiding her from me while parading her in public as a prop for his success. And she, artist Chloe Vance. She wasn't just some stifling homemaker. She had an identity he was actively using for his own corporate image. I leaned back, my mind clicking into a place I hadn't visited since my dissertation. A place of pure, cold forensic analysis. He had 2 victims. He just didn't know it yet. Finding Chloe Vance wasn't difficult. Artists, even homemakers, need a digital footprint. She had a website, a modest one, showcasing ethereal, slightly melancholy paintings of empty rooms and stark coastlines. They were good. They were also priced far below their value. Her site had a small events tab. Meet the artist at the Union Square Farmers Market, second Saturday of every month. Stall 28. The second Saturday was 3 days away. I spent those 3 days becoming a different person. With Marcus, I was the perfect understanding secondary. I was his heir. I listened to him complain about the pressure of his $50 million deal and the cluelessness of his wife. She's trying to redo the kitchen, he griped, his head in my lap as I sat on my gray sofa, as if we're made of money. This, from a man who had booked a table at Alinea. I ran my fingers through his hair, my touch light, my stomach churning. That sounds stressful, I murmured. You have no idea. When Saturday came, the air was bright and cold. The farmers' market was a riot of noise and color, a sharp contrast to the curated silence of my life. The air smelled of damp earth, fresh cider, and grilled sausages. Children shrieked, and a bluegrass band played enthusiastically, if not well, near the entrance. I felt like a predator. I was dressed in what I thought of as my off-duty uniform. Dark jeans, expensive but understated boots, a cashmere sweater, and sunglasses. I was just another middle-aged woman looking for organic kale. I found stall 28 easily. Her paintings were propped up on wooden easels. They were even more compelling in person, full of a quiet, lonely light. And there she was. She was lovelier than her photos. Chloe was tall, with a curtain of blonde hair she kept tucking behind her ear. She was wearing a worn, oatmeal-colored linen smock over a striped shirt, her hands stained with flecks of cobalt blue paint. She looked like the art she made. I didn't approach. Not yet. I was a therapist. Observation was my primary tool. I bought a bag of apples from the stall opposite, the sweet, winey smell of Macintoshes filling my senses. I leaned against a post and watched her. She was kind. That was the first thing I saw. She smiled at everyone, even the people who clearly weren't buying, who just glanced at her work and walked on. A small child reached out a sticky hand toward a canvas, and Chloe gently intercepted him, not with a scold, but by offering him a small, painted wooden block from a box on her table. "This one is for touching," she said, her voice warm. But she was also, just as the plan had predicted, visibly stressed. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her shoulders were high, and she kept, almost obsessively, checking her phone. I needed to get closer. I bought a cup of hot cider, the cardboard sleeve barely protecting my fingers from the heat. I began to browse her stall, moving from one painting to the next, pretending to study them. "These are beautiful," I said. She startled, then gave me that quick, bright, tired smile. "Oh, thank you so," she said, her voice a little breathless. That's the coast near my husband's family's old place." "Your husband," I said, my voice perfectly neutral. "Is he here?" "Oh, God, no," she laughed, a small, nervous sound. "No, Marcus. Marcus is not a farmer's market person. He works, even on Saturday." She said works with a finality that suggested it was a conversation ender in her house. "I understand," I said. "My work is demanding too." She looked at me, a flicker of genuine connection. "What do you do?" "I'm a therapist," I said. Her entire posture changed. It wasn't fear. It was a kind of desperate, hungry interest. "A therapist? Wow! Like a couples therapist?" "Among other things, I I admire that. I think communication is just, it's so hard, isn't it? It's the hardest thing, I agreed, my heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat. Right on cue, her phone chimed. A text. She flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "I'm so sorry," she said, her eyes darting to the screen. "Please, go ahead." She turned slightly, trying to shield the screen, but I was already in position. I saw the text notification. It was from Marcus. The message was terse. "Bank transfer done." "Don't go over." Chloe's face tightened. Her thumb moved, quick and practiced. She didn't text back. She opened an app, a banking app. I saw the logo, Chase. She tapped in her password. Her balance was visible for a fraction of a second, but I saw it. I saw the comma. I saw the number on the left of it. It was a checking account, and it held less than my last dinner bill. She then tapped on transfers, and I saw an incoming amount. $500, her shoulders slumped. She let out a breath, a long, shaky sigh, and for a second, her eyes closed. When she opened them, she looked directly at a large, stunning canvas of an empty, sunlit room. A "sold" sticker was on the frame. "Well," she said, forcing the bright smile back. "At least that one's paid for." She looked back at her phone. She typed a reply to Marcus. "Thank you." The pieces slammed into place. This was the woman with no concept of money. This was the woman trapped in the 1950s. A woman with her own career, her own talent, who had to text her husband thank you for a $500 transfer. A woman who looked at a sold painting not with pride, but with the raw relief of someone who had just made rent. This wasn't a partnership. It was a dictatorship. He wasn't just lying to her. He was controlling her, financially, emotionally. My rage, which had been a cold, surgical thing, now found a new gear. It was hot. It was pure. I knew what I had to do. I fumbled with my cider, accidentally sloshing a few hot drops onto my own hand. "Ow! Oh my gosh!" Chloe was instantly by my side, grabbing a stack of napkins. "Are you okay?" "Here, let me..." She dabbed at my hand, her touch surprisingly gentle, her fingers stained with that beautiful blue. I'm fine, I said, pulling back. So clumsy. "I'm Alara, by the way, Chloe," she said, still looking at my hand with concern. "Are you sure?" "I have some water." "I'm sure," I said, meeting her eyes. They were kind, so kind, and completely trapped. "Chloe, your work is incredible." Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Her eyes widened, as if she was about to cry. "Thank you," she whispered. That means a lot. I bought a small painting, a 6x6 canvas of a single windswept tree. I paid in cash, crisp $50 bills that I peeled from my wallet. I overpaid, telling her to keep the change for the framing. Her hand closed over the money. As I walked away, the bag in my hand felt heavy. The bluegrass music sounded distant and thin. My revenge was no longer just about me. It wasn't about the affair, or the lie, or my own humiliation. It was about her. I was going to dismantle Marcus Vance's life, but I was going to do it in a way that liberated his wife. I was going to give Chloe the one thing he had so carefully, cruelly denied her, the truth and the money. I got in my car and sat for a long moment. The little painting on the seat beside me. I pulled out my phone. A text from Marcus was waiting. "Marcus, thinking about you. My place tonight? Primary is at her book club." My thumbs moved. I thought of Chloe's face, her kindness, her quiet panic at the banking app. Me. I'll be there. I'll even bring the wine. I drove home. I took out my laptop. I opened a private browser, and I typed in the web address for Marcus's Hadrian Wealth employee portal. The login screen appeared. "User, M. Vance," I typed in the password. 1024, I hit enter, and I was in. I was home. It was 2:17 a.m. My mouth was sour with the taste of an expensive Cabernet I hadn't wanted, and the scent of sandalwood was clinging to my sweater. I felt contaminated, my skin crawling. as if I'd waded through a sewer in designer clothes. Going to his apartment had been a tactical necessity, the one he supposedly shared with his primary. It was exactly what I'd expected. Masculine, sterile, and soulless, all gray flannel and dark wood. It smelled faintly of Chloe's lavender-scented cleaning products, a domestic trace he'd failed to erase. He had been in rare form, high on the success of his $50 million deal and the secret of our rendezvous. "This is it," he'd said, pouring me a glass of the Cabernet, his back to me. "The masterpiece. I'll be able to write my own ticket after this one." "And Chloe?" I'd asked, my voice a soft purr of manufactured interest. "She'll be taken care of." He'd smiled, a quick, cold flash. "Don't you worry about that." He'd taken a call from a colleague pacing the living room, talking in low, urgent tones about finalizing the wire transfers. While he was distracted, I'd slipped into his home office. His laptop was on the desk, asleep. I tapped the spacebar. The login screen appeared. I typed 1024. It unlocked. My heart was a fist in my chest. I had seconds. His desktop was a mess of folders. Invoices, clients, personal, taxes. I created a new email in his Outlook, one to an anonymous Proton Mail account I'd set up an hour before. projectphoenixopm.me. I didn't have time to sift. I just had to grab. I attached the entire taxes folder. I attached the entire personal folder. I attached the one file on his desktop labeled Hadrian Masterpiece Deal. I hit send. Then I deleted the message from his sent items and emptied his deleted folder. By the time he'd hung up the phone, I was back on the sofa, swirling my wine. He'd put on music, some soulless minimalist jazz. He'd pulled me close. I'd had to endure his touch, his kiss, the smell of his skin. I'd had to feign a headache, the irony was bitter on my tongue, and leave, promising more us time for the weekend. Now I was finally home. I'd scrubbed my hands and face, but I still felt his phantom touch. I sat at my desk, the small 6x6 painting of the windswept tree from Chloe propped up against my monitor. I opened my own laptop. I logged into Project. Phoenix, there it was. One new email with 3 large folder attachments. I started with Hadrian Masterpiece Deal. It was exactly as he'd bragged. A $50 million merger. I scrolled through the corporate speak, the contracts, the liability waivers, until I found what I was looking for. The commission agreement. My breath hitched. It wasn't just a good bonus. It was a 7-figure payout. His payout, payable upon closing. The signature date on the final wire transfer instruction was set for 14 days from now. He wasn't just wealthy, he was about to be obscenely rich. I closed the file, my hand shaking slightly. I opened the taxes folder. It was a jumble of old returns, receipts, and quarterly statements. It looked normal, boring. Then I opened the personal folder. It was mostly photos, trips, the kids, the boat from Chloe's profile picture. But one file stood out. Its name simple, clean, and devastating. Asset sheet, draft V3. XLSXSI clicked. An Excel spreadsheet opened, its grid a stark map of a 22-year marriage, the house, their cars, a small stock portfolio, a 401k, and then a line item, art collection, C. Vance. The value entered in the adjacent cell was $0. My blood turned to ice. I thought of the vibrant, beautiful paintings, the sold sticker. He hadn't just undervalued them, he had zeroed them out. I scrolled down. I saw the bank accounts I'd seen him use for work, and then 2 lines I didn't recognize. Geneva Fund, and Cayman holdings. The numbers next to them were staggering. He wasn't just hiding assets, he was hiding empires. I remembered the taxes folder. I clicked back to it, opening his last filed return. The Geneva and Cayman accounts were nowhere to be found. This wasn't just a spreadsheet, it was a confession. It was evidence of massive, intentional criminal fraud. But why? Why document it? I went back to the personal folder. Tucked beneath the asset sheet was a Word document I'd almost missed. It was called Separation Notes. My fingers felt numb as I double-clicked. The document opened. It wasn't a letter, it was a strategy log. May 10th. Spoke to a teacher. He confirms C's art is non-viable as income stream. She has no earning potential. May 22. C complaining about kitchen. Stalled her. Must maintain status quo until deal closes. June 3. Payout for H deal set for end of Q4. Must file for divorce before bonus lands. ATI confirms bonus is post-separation income if timing is correct. Clean break. July 8th. Drafted asset sheet. House value lowballed. C won't know the difference. Offer her the house, pre-undervalue, and minimum support. She'll be grateful just to keep the house. She's too passive to fight. I read the last line twice. She's too passive to fight. I leaned back in my chair, the air driven from my lungs. This was the radical honesty. This was the man who didn't believe in owning people. He wasn't just planning to leave her. He was planning to execute her. To leave the mother of his children, the woman who had supported his career for 22 years, with an undervalued house and zero earning potential, while he walked away with his 7-figure bonus and 2 secret offshore accounts. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a sociopath. The cold, surgical rage I'd felt at the farmer's market was gone. The hot, pure anger I'd felt for Chloe was gone too. In their place was a vast, cold, empty space, a void of absolute, terrifying clarity. I looked at the little painting on my desk. The windswept tree, standing alone, surviving. She's too passive to fight. No, I whispered to the empty room. She just doesn't have the right weapons. I created a new encrypted folder on my desktop. I dragged asset sheet draft v3.xlsx into it. I dragged separation and notes.docs into it. I dragged the commission agreement and the offshore account statements. I right-clicked on the new folder. I clicked rename. I typed in the new name, detonation. My phone buzzed on the desk. A new text. Marcus. Left my watch at your place, on the nightstand. Can I swing by and grab it in the morning? I looked at the screen. He had, of course, not left his watch. It was a test, a way to see me, to keep the connection, to ensure his air supply was still intact. I thought of the man in the spreadsheet, the cold, calculating predator. I typed my reply. Me. Of course. I'll buzz you up. The chime of my building's intercom cut through the morning silence at 8:15 a.m. You're up early, I said into the speaker, my voice a passable imitation of sleepy affection. Creature of habit, Marcus's voice crackled back. Can I come up? Just for a minute. I have a 9 a.m. client. I buzzed him in. I was dressed. I'd been up for hours, my mind a grid of data points and attack vectors. I'd made coffee, the bitter, dark roast smell a necessary stimulant. I was standing in my kitchen, my laptop open on the counter, when he walked in. He looked fresh, showered, wearing a crisp shirt and that same faint scent of sandalwood. The scent of my humiliation. He smiled, that easy, charming smile. Where is it? He asked, walking straight toward the bedroom. Nightstand, I called after him. I stayed at the counter, my back to him. I was scrolling through our text thread, page after page of his lies. You're my escape from all that. She's not on my wavelength. Family drama. You're the only one I can be real with. My thumb hovered over the screenshot buttons. Not yet. Not while he was here. He re-emerged from the bedroom, strapping his watch, the one I'd never seen him take off, the one he'd forgotten, onto his wrist. He walked up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, pulling my back against his chest. I went rigid. My body's betrayal was instant, a full, visceral recoil. He felt it. "Hey," he murmured into my hair, his grip tightening. "Everything okay? You feel tense?" I forced my muscles to unlock. I leaned back into him, a performance of surrender. "Sorry," I breathed. "That 9 a.m. It's a high-conflict couple. I'm already prepping for war." He chuckled, the sound of vibration against my spine. He believed it, of course. My work was a convenient excuse. "Well, let me give you some fuel." He kissed the side of my neck. I shut my eyes, my hands gripping the cold granite of the countertop. I focused on the smell of the coffee, on the hum of the refrigerator, on the grid of the Excel spreadsheet open in my mind. He let me go. "Better?" "Better," I lied, turning to face him. I put my hands on his chest, a gesture of intimacy that cost me everything. "Go close your big deal, Rainmaker." He grinned, pecking me on the lips. The touch was dry and proprietary. "This weekend," he said, "you and me, we'll celebrate. I can't wait." He left. I watched the door click shut. I didn't move. I counted to 60, 1 full minute, to be sure he was in the elevator. Then I walked to the door and engaged the deadbolt, the sound a heavy, satisfying thunk. I went back to the kitchen and grabbed my phone. I started at the top of our text history, from the very first message. I screenshotted everything. The radical honesty proposition, the dates, the sweet nothings, and most importantly, every single time he mentioned his primary, his family drama, or his stifling wife. It took 20 minutes. I uploaded every image to the secure anonymous project.phoenix email account. Then I got to work. My first stop was a nondescript electronics store in a different neighborhood. I paid cash for a 64-gigabyte encrypted flash drive, the kind with a physical number pad on it. I also bought a simple padded yellow mailer. My second stop was a public library branch I had never visited, miles from my home or office. The air inside smelled of old paper, floor wax, and dust. I sat at a public terminal, the keyboard sticky, the mouse sluggish. I logged into project.phoenix. I downloaded the detonation folder. I plugged in the flash drive, typed in the new sterile pin I'd set, and began to copy the files. Asset sheet, draft v3. XLSX, separation, notes, .docs. Hadrian, masterpiece, deal, commission, PDF. The screenshots of my text message history. The photo of Marcus and Chloe from the Arts Gala. The one captioned, Marcus Vance and his wife, artist Chloe Vance. I created one last file on the drive, a simple text document. I typed, Chloe. He was going to leave you with nothing. He was going to do it before his bonus landed, so you wouldn't see a dime. Read the separation notes. Check the asset sheet against his real tax returns. Ask him about the Geneva Fund. He has been having an affair for the last 4 months. The text messages are in this drive. He lied to me just as much as he lied to you. He thinks you're too passive to fight. Prove him wrong. I ejected the drive and slipped it into my pocket. Next, I created a new, untraceable email address, the one for the firm. Hadrian.liability.noticeepm.me. I logged into that account. I attached the separation notes. I attached the asset sheet. I attached the offshore account statements. I looked up the executive board of Hadrian Wealth. I found the names of the CEO, Alistair Reed, and the head of HR, Cynthia Lowell. I typed their emails into the to field. For the subject, I wrote, Urgent, Liability and Ethical Breach Notification, Marcus Vance. In the body, I kept it professional, cold, and corporate. To the board of Hadrian Wealth. It has come to my attention that your SVP, Marcus Vance, is actively engaged in a conspiracy to commit felony-level financial fraud by concealing significant marital assets, see attached offshore accounts, in preparation for a divorce. His intent, as detailed in the attached planning document, is to defraud his wife of her legal share of his forthcoming commission from the Hadrian Masterpiece deal. This willful act of fraud, using firm resources and time, exposes Hadrian Wealth to significant legal and financial liability. His actions demonstrate a pattern of deceit that puts the firm, its partners, and its clients at severe risk. I trust you will handle this matter with the gravity it deserves. I did not hit send. I saved it as a draft. One last thing. I went to a payphone, a filthy ancient relic I'd scouted 3 days prior. I wiped the receiver with a tissue and dialed a number I knew from memory. It rang twice. Julian. The voice was female, sharp, and perpetually annoyed. You're on the clock. Juliana Cole, the most ruthless forensic accountant in the city. We'd been in the same scholarship program at university. She was brilliant, amoral, and utterly loyal to me after I'd helped her with a family matter a decade ago. Jules. It's Ilara. Vance. The annoyance softened, just a fraction. This isn't social. What's the emergency? It's research, I said, the lie tasting metallic on my tongue. For a book I'm outlining. A book, she scoffed. You? Your life is one big NDA. Fine, what's the hypo? Hypothetically, I said, my voice low, I have a husband, wealth manager, high level. He's planning to divorce his wife. He has a masterpiece deal closing, a 7-figure commission. He plans to file before the bonus lands to classify it as post-separation income. Juliana was silent. I heard the click-clack of her keyboard. Smart, she finally said. And scummy. What's the question? He also has a secret asset sheet. He's undervaluing marital property. He's zeroed out his wife's career assets. He has 2 offshore accounts, Geneva and Cayman, not listed on his domestic returns. The keyboard clacking stopped. I heard her inhale. Holy shit, Ilara. This isn't a book. This is a felony. This isn't just divorce court. This is wire fraud, tax evasion. This is go to federal prison territory. The words hit me. Federal prison. So, I pushed. Hypothetically, if an anonymous package with that spreadsheet and those account numbers landed on, say, his wife's doorstep, what would happen? Her lawyer would file an ex parte emergency motion, Juliana said instantly, her voice practically vibrating with professional glee. Freeze everything, every account, every asset, the deal, the bonus, the house. The wife's attorney would subpoena the firm, the banks, the offshore entities. The IRS would get an anonymous tip-off. Your protagonist, Ilara, would be, what's the word? Oh, right, destroyed. My hand was white-knuckled on the receiver. And the wife? Would she be okay? Are you kidding? With that evidence? She'd get everything. The bonus, the house, the hidden accounts, plus damages. She'd own him. Your book sounds great, Ilara. Thanks, Jules. You've been a huge help. Don't call me again, she said, and hung up. I placed the receiver back on the hook. Destroyed. Federally. The stakes were higher than I'd known. My plan wasn't just revenge. It was, as Juliana said, a felony. I was facilitating a criminal complaint. I walked back to my car, the little flash drive a heavy weight in my pocket. I was no longer just an aggrieved mistress. I was an executioner, and I was ready. It was 3 nights later. The flash drive was in the zipped compartment of my briefcase, a cold, hard rectangle of plastic and metal. The draft sat in the hadrian.liability.noticeepm.me email account, a single click from Armageddon. I had spent the last 72 hours in a state of suspended animation, a clinical, buzzing calm. I saw my clients. I guided them through their small human hypocrisies. I listened to a wife confess she'd hidden a credit card, and I heard a husband admit he'd lied about a job offer. I nodded. I validated. I helped them find a path to their own small truths. And all the while, the detonation folder sat in my mind. Marcus was supposed to be at my condo at 8. He was late. At 8:30, my phone chimed. Marcus, this deal is killing me. Still at the office. Need to see you. Need to breathe. On my way. Need to breathe. I was his heir, his escape. The thought, which had once felt like a privilege, now felt like a violation. I was his iron lung, keeping his toxic self alive so he could go back to suffocating his wife. Me. The door is open. I poured 2 glasses of Sancerre, the bottle cold and slick with condensation, against my palm. I set them on the coffee table. I put on the minimalist jazz he liked, the music a thin, reedy whine in the silent room. I was setting the stage for the last time. When he arrived, he didn't knock. He just let himself in, a familiarity that set my teeth on edge. He looked wrecked, but in the way successful men do. His tie was loosened, his sleeves were rolled up, and his hair was artfully messy. He looked like a man who was winning a very expensive fight. God, Alara, he sighed, dropping his briefcase by the door. He didn't kiss me. He just collapsed onto my gray sofa, his head falling back. Hard day? I asked, sitting in the armchair opposite him. Not on the sofa, not where he could touch me. The hardest. He scrubbed his face with his hands. We're signing tomorrow. The wire transfers? The final audit? It's a nightmare, but it's done. He opened his eyes, and they were electric, blazing with adrenaline and arrogance. It's finally done. Tomorrow, Ilara, I am a made man. Congratulations, I said. My voice was a flat, neutral thing. He frowned, sensing the distance. Hey, he leaned forward. What's wrong with you? Just tired, I said. Long week. Come here. He patted the cushion next to him. I'm the one who's supposed to be a wreck. You're my escape, remember? Don't be this. I stood. I walked over. I did not sit. I perched on the edge of the coffee table, just out of his reach. You close the deal tomorrow. Then what, Marcus? He smiled, that slow proprietary smile. Then we celebrate. I'm taking you away. A week, somewhere warm. Just us. No primary, no family, just... His phone, which he'd placed on the table between us, began to ring. The screen lit up. Chloe. His entire body changed. The energized, victorious man vanished, replaced by a weary, put-upon teenager. He let out the loudest, most theatrical sigh I had ever heard. He snatched the phone. I have to take this, he snapped, as if I had interrupted him. He stood and walked to the balcony, sliding the glass door shut, but not all the way. A 6-inch gap remained. I didn't move. I just listened. The minimalist jazz was a quiet, nervous scratching beneath his voice. What, Chloe? What is it now? A pause. I pictured her on the other end, in that house, her hands stained with paint, her voice small, asking for something. No, he said, his voice dropping into a low, cruel monotone. I did not forget. The plumber is scheduled. You just don't listen. Another pause. Her voice must have risen, because his did too. God, you are unbelievable. I am in the middle of the biggest deal of my life, And you are calling me about a leaking faucet. Do you have any concept of reality? I watched his silhouette through the glass. He was pacing, a caged, angry animal. What? What are you? He stopped. He laughed, a short barking sound that had no humor in it. Paranoid? You want to talk about paranoid? You're asking me where I am. I'm at the office, Chloe. I'm always at the office. Where the hell else would I be? The word paranoid hung in the air, a drop of poison. You know what? He spat. I'm not doing this. You're being crazy. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're crazy and you're paranoid, and you need to get a grip. I'll be home when I'm home. He jabbed the end call button. He stood there for a moment, his back to me, breathing heavily, staring out at the city lights. I watched his shoulders, which were tight with rage, slowly unknot. He was visibly, actively calming himself. He was shedding the skin of Marcus, the cruel husband. He turned. He slid the glass door open, and the cold night air, smelling of rain and exhaust, washed into the room. He had a smile on his face. A bright, relieved, almost giddy smile. He walked over to the sofa, picked up his wine glass, and drained it. Jesus, he said, shaking his head as if clearing cobwebs. He looked at me, his eyes now warm and intimate, as if we were co-conspirators. Family drama. He sat down, sprawling on the sofa, the picture of relaxation. He patted the cushion beside him again. You're my escape from all that, he said, his voice soft and inviting. God, I needed this. I needed you. The hypocrisy was so profound, so complete, it was almost artistic. It was a perfect, seamless lie. He wasn't two men. He was one man, turning a dial, switching frequencies from abuse to seduce without a single flicker of static. And I was the person he used as a power source. A hot, acidic bile rose in my throat. I tasted the Sancerre I'd sipped earlier, now soured by his presence. I stood up, my movement jerky. I have to use the bathroom. Ilara? I didn't answer. I walked, stiff-legged, to my bathroom and shut the door, locking it behind me. I gripped the edges of my cold marble sink. I leaned over the basin and gagged, a dry, body-racking heave that brought tears to my eyes. Nothing came up but disgust. I stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide and horrified. This wasn't just revenge. This was an exorcism. He wasn't just a liar. He was a cancer, and he was in my home. The clinical calm I'd cultivated for 3 days shattered, replaced by a definitive, righteous rage. Juliana's words echoed in my head. Federal prison, destroyed. It wasn't enough. It was justice. I knew with an animal certainty that I could not let him touch me again. I could not see him tomorrow. I could not let him celebrate with me. The plan was no longer tomorrow. The plan was now. As soon as he was gone, I splashed cold water on my face, the shock of it a welcome pain. I dried my skin, took a deep, steadying breath, and unlocked the door. He was on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, smiling at something on the screen. He looked up, his face open and unsuspecting. You okay? You look pale. I'm just tired, Marcus, I said. My voice was new. It was cold, clear, and perfectly steady. I think you should go. His smile faltered. What? I just got here. I have an early start. And you have a big day tomorrow. I walked to the door and opened it. I was no longer his escape. I was his ejector seat. He stared at me, confused, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He'd been denied his air. He stood, grabbing his briefcase, his movements huffy, offended. Fine, he snapped. If you're going to be like this, I'll see you. Soon, I said. He walked past me, not giving me a kiss, a punishment he thought I'd feel. Maybe, he said and walked out. I shut the door. I engaged the deadbolt, the sound a final metallic thunk. I stood in my hallway for a full minute, just breathing. Then I walked to my office, my footsteps echoing in the condo he would never enter again. I sat at my desk. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the draft in the hadrian.liability.noticeapm.me account. I read it one last time. My finger hovered over the mouse. I clicked send, or one down. The next morning, I woke before my alarm. The sun hadn't risen, but the city was bathed in a pre-dawn chemical blue light. I showered, dressed, and drank a glass of water, but no coffee. I needed absolute cold clarity. At 8:30 a.m., I was at a post office in a neighborhood I never visited, 20 miles from my condo. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and bureaucratic dust. I walked to the counter, my heels clicking on the linoleum. The padded yellow mailer felt light in my hand. Inside, the encrypted flash drive held the full weight of Marcus Vance's life. "Just this," I said to the clerk. I paid cash for next-day guaranteed delivery. I pushed the envelope across the steel counter. It was addressed to Chloe Vance, artist, personal and confidential. I watched him affix the postage. He dropped it into a gray bin. It was done. Phase 1. I went to my office. I saw my 10 a.m. I saw my 11:30 a.m. I listened. I nodded. I was a perfect mirror, reflecting back my client's anxieties while hiding my own vibrating electric core. At 3 p.m., I was with the Millers, a couple on the brink. My phone was on my desk, face down, on silent. She doesn't respect me, Mr. Miller was saying, his voice cracking. She laughs when I say I'm overwhelmed. Mrs. Miller's arms were crossed, a wall of defense. He doesn't say he's overwhelmed. He just gets quiet for days. How am I supposed to know? So the silence, I said, my voice calm, is a weapon. And the laughter is a shield. As they talked, my phone vibrated. A long, angry buzz. Then another, and another. A frantic, desperate series of vibrations, like a trapped moth beating against glass. I kept my eyes on my clients. At that same moment, in a glass-walled office 40 blocks away, Marcus was popping the cork on a bottle of champagne. His team was laughing, applauding. He'd done it. The masterpiece deal was signed. The wire transfers were initiated. His assistant's voice came over the intercom. "Marcus, Mr. Reed and Ms. Lowell need to see you in the main boardroom. Now. Tell them to grab a glass." He'd have laughed. "Now, Marcus, they said to leave your phone." My phone continued to buzz. A call this time. It vibrated for a full 10 seconds, then stopped. Then almost immediately, it began to buzz again. The same number. I just want him to talk to me," Mrs. Miller was crying now. At that same moment, in a house in the suburbs, Chloe Vance was holding the flash drive. The mail had come. The yellow package had felt strange. She had plugged the drive into her old laptop, her hand trembling as she read my note. She had seen the text messages first, my texts, his lies about her. Then she had opened the spreadsheet. Asset, sheet, draft, V3.XLSX. She saw the Geneva Fund. She saw her art, her life's work, valued at $0. She had seen for the first time the shape and size of her cage. She saw the separation notes. She saw the phrase, "She's too passive to fight." My phone buzzed again. A new number. Marcus in the boardroom was being shown a printout of my email, the one I'd sent last night, the one the CEO and head of HR had been reading while he was pouring champagne. "Is this your document, Marcus?" Chloe, her face white, was on the phone. Not with Marcus. She was on the phone with the most aggressive divorce attorney in the state. She was emailing him the entire detonation folder. She was, I knew, fighting. My session ended at 3:50 p.m. The Millers left, holding hands, a fragile truce. I turned my phone over. 34 missed calls. 18 from Marcus, 16 from unknown, a wall of text messages. Marcus, "What the hell did you do?" Marcus, "Call me, now." Marcus, "They're suspending me. They're freezing the deal." Marcus, "Elara, I'm coming to your office." Marcus, "Answer me." Marcus, "You bitch. You ruined me." Marcus, "It was you. It was all you. You set me up." Marcus, "You'll pay for this. I swear to God you will pay." I read them all, my face impassive. I shut down my laptop, packed my briefcase, and left my office. At 7 p.m., I was home. I'd made a salad. I was drinking water. The minimalist jazz was not playing. The silence was absolute. The intercom buzzed, a harsh, violent sound that ripped through the quiet. I walked to the panel by the door. I pressed talk. Alara. His voice was a raw, distorted scream through the speaker. You open this door. You open this door right now. I could hear him banging on the lobby's glass. Hello, Marcus, I said. My voice was calm. It was my therapist voice, clinical, cold. You whore. You ruined me, my deal. My accounts, they're frozen. Chloe, she froze everything. My wife, my firm. Everything is gone! What did you do? I let his voice echo. I let the silence sit. You lied, Marcus, I said, my voice as clear as glass. You used a philosophy of honesty to deceive two women. You told me I was your heir. You told her she was crazy. I'll destroy you, he sobbed. It was a sob, a sound of pure narcissistic collapse. I'll tell everyone. What will you tell them, Marcus? That you, a senior vice president, were conned by your mistress? That you were defrauding your wife and your firm? That I have copies of your offshore account numbers and your texts? Please, go ahead. A choked, strangled sound came through the speaker. I'm a therapist, Marcus, I said, the final words landing like surgical steel. My job is to facilitate breakthroughs, and you are finally experiencing the natural consequences of your actions. I pressed the end call button. I heard one more animal howl of rage, and then the sound of him pounding the glass. I turned away from the intercom. I walked to my kitchen and I finished my salad. 1 month later, I was having lunch with Juliana Cole. The air was crisp, and we were sitting on a patio, the sun warm on my face. You're not writing a book, are you? She said, peering at me over her kale salad. No, I said. Good. You're a terrible liar. She pushed the business journal across the table, her fingernail tapping a small item on page 4. The headline was muted. Hadrian SVP fired amid ethical probe. I read the lines. Marcus Vance, terminated for gross ethical violations. The firm is cooperating fully with federal and state investigations. A pending high-value merger has been permanently scuttled. Vance's wife has filed for divorce, and all marital assets are frozen pending litigation. Federal prison, Juliana murmured, sipping her water. Told you. She'll be okay, I said. It wasn't a question. She'll be more than okay, Juliana said. She'll be rich. The next week, a package arrived at my office. A long, flat rectangular box, wrapped in simple brown paper. There was no return address. I opened it. Inside was a painting. It was not small. It was a large, vibrant canvas, 3 feet wide. It was a painting of a single, powerful bird, its wings spread wide, rising from a nest of gray and black ash. The colors were explosive, crimson, gold, and a vibrant cobalt blue I recognized. A phoenix. There was no note. I hung it on the wall in my waiting room. My final client of the day arrived. A new couple, young, nervous, sitting on the edge of my sofa. So, the man began, his hand twisting in his lap. We're here because we want to try an open relationship. We want to be ethical about it, but we're scared. He looked at his partner. We're scared of the honesty. I looked at them. I saw their fear, their hope, their fragile, complex desire. I thought of Marcus. I thought of Chloe. I thought of the painting of the phoenix in the other room. I leaned forward, a small, knowing, powerful smile on my face. Honesty, I said, is everything.